So, not too long ago I made a video ranking all of the attack class weapons in Naruto Shinobi Striker. And since you guys seem to have liked that video, we'll be continuing the series today and rank every single range class weapon this time around. We'll cover everything from the very basic weapons all the way to the crazy SS Plus stuff out there. So, without any further ado, let's jump into it. Starting off the list, we have the Kunai. And by Kunai, I really mean all of these weapons, because in case you didn't know, they all share the exact same moveset. So this is about as standard as it gets. There's really not much going for this weapon. When using the strong attack, you throw a Kunai, but it's actually slower than using a Kunai as a ninja tool, which makes it much easier to dodge. Some of the combos can be decent, especially the light into heavy string on the ground, but there's nothing really here that really stands out or feels unique. On top of that, the weapon is pretty slow and has kind of poor tracking, which makes it difficult to consistently connect with enemies. Overall, just a very basic and underwhelming option. Next up, we have the Hidden Leaf Dagger. This weapon is very similar to the Kunai moveset with only a few small differences. It's a bit faster, which is definitely noticeable, but it also does lose access to some of the Kunai combos, like the one where you kick the enemy and you can follow up with a ninjutsu. That being said, the increased speed and slightly better tracking make it feel a bit more reliable overall. For me personally though, that's enough to give it a small edge over the standard Kunai weapons. Continuing down the list, we have the water pistols. This is one of those fully ranged weapons that lets you fire water bullets at your opponent. Now, personally, I'm just not a big fan of purely ranged weapons like this. They tend to feel slow and pretty limiting once someone gets close to you, and that's definitely the case here as well. In terms of versatility, there's really not much going on either. Aside from the surf style attack, most of the moves are just variations of ranged water projectiles. And to make things worse, the tracking on those projectiles can be kind of inconsistent. Sometimes they just decide to not track at all, which is not great. And yeah, overall, it's just not a very fun playstyle for me. You can definitely make it work, but it's not something I personally enjoy using. Continuing down the list, we have the Cloud Short Sword. This is another base game weapon, and it follows a pretty familiar moveset to the other ones. Once again, the strong attack is the exact same, just a kunai, which really limits the combo variety you can get out of it. It does have a slightly different light attack sequence, so I'll give it that, but aside from that, it's very similar to the rest of these basic weapons. So nothing too exciting here. Next up, we have Violet Might. This one is honestly a bit disappointing because I feel like it could rank much higher if it didn't have one major flaw: the tracking. For a close range weapon, the tracking is just incredibly poor, and that's kind of a deal breaker. Because outside of that, it's a really fun weapon to use. It has 3 different strong attacks depending on how many times you press the button, giving you 2 projectile options and a spray type attack, which is a cool bit of variety. But the problem is, when you try to engage enemies up close, the tracking just completely lets you down. Things go wrong way too often and it ends up just being super unreliable. Honestly, it feels more effective to use it just as a ranged weapon, but if that's what you're going to use it for, there are plenty of other weapons in the game that simply do a better job. Now, continuing down the list, we have the Kiba Thunder Sword Release. This is an SS weapon, but funnily enough, the moveset is very similar to the basic kunai weapons. The biggest difference here is the strong attack, which is replaced by a lightning zap instead of a kunai. And honestly, I do prefer this version slightly. It feels like it connects more consistently than the standard kunai throw. But aside from that, it's still very much in the line with those basic weapons, not a huge leap despite being an SS weapon. Hey, just a quick break from the list to ask you to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video thus far. I kinda have to say this since you'd be surprised how much it helps in terms of actually getting people to sub. Nevertheless, thanks a lot, and now back to the list. Continuing down the list, we have the Fire Pistols. These are basically the counterpart to the Water Pistols, but in my opinion, just straight up better. Right away, the strong attack stands out. It fires a barrage of bullets, which makes it much easier to hit multiple opponents at once. On top of that, finishing a combo lets you attach a paper bomb to the enemy that explodes after a short delay, which is just really fun to use and adds a nice extra layer to the weapon. Overall, I just think this weapon looks cooler and feels more satisfying to play with, which is why I had to rank it higher. That said, it still has some of the same issues as the water pistol. It is primarily a ranged weapon, so the projectile tracking can be a bit inconsistent at times. So while it is better, it's not perfect by any means. Next up, we have the Hanzo Sickle. The main gimmick of this weapon is its strong attack, which lets you pull enemies towards you. Now, in theory, that sounds great, but in practice, it's just kind of inconsistent. The attack takes too long to come out and the tracking isn't great, and even when it does connect, it doesn't always fully pull the enemy in. That alone makes it pretty unreliable. As for the rest of the moveset, it's fine. The light attacks and light to heavy combos are solid and the tracking is decent and it connects fairly often. But nothing really stands out or pushes it into a higher tier for me. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, but the inconsistency of those strong attacks really holds it back. Continuing on, we have the Kusanagi. This is the final base weapon, and similarly to the Cloud Short Sword, it differentiates itself mainly through its light attack sequences rather than the strong attack. Out of all of the base weapons, I'd say this is the best one. Weapons like the Kunai and the Dagger struggled with its tracking and reliability, but that's much less of an issue here. And overall, Kusanagi just feels more consistent and dependable to use. That being said, it's still a very basic weapon compared to what comes later in this list, so there's only so high it can go. Moving on, we have Shisui's Katana. This is one of those weapons where I'm not entirely sure what to think of it. On one hand, it has a pretty solid strong attack that lets you theoretically spam, which is definitely a plus. But on the other hand, some of the most important combos, especially the aerial ones, are extremely short. You basically teleport away after just a few hits, which can feel a bit awkward to use. Some players might actually like that, especially if you're playing ranged and just want to get some quick damage in and disengage, but personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. It can set you up nicely for the strong attack, but the tracking on that attack isn't the most consistent either, so it does end up missing more often than you'd like. So yeah, it's definitely a cool weapon visually and mechanically, but overall it just doesn't feel the most reliable. Continuing on, we have the Kakashi Chakra Dagger. So this is an SS weapon that still has the same kunai strong attack, but trust me, everything else about it is a noticeable upgrade compared to the basic weapons in this game. The combo strings are much better. Almost every combo lets you either bounce the enemy off the ground or launch them into the air. For example, the basic ground light attack strings flow directly into the aerial light combo, which makes everything feel really smooth and connected. On top of that, the actual hitboxes of this weapon feel larger, which gives it better range and makes it much easier to stay on your opponent during combos. The tracking can be a bit inconsistent at times. For example, it doesn't always follow up properly after something like Flash Slice, but it's not terrible by any means. So yeah, even though the strong attack is still just the kunai, this is definitely a clear upgrade overall, and I mean, it is an SS weapon after all. Moving down the list, we have Utakata's Bubble Pipe. This is another weapon that closely resembles the kunai moveset, but with one major difference. The strong attack throws out bubbles that track the targeted enemy. Some of the combo finishers are different too. For example, the ground light heavy string ends up with a bubble attack, but a lot of the base combos still feel familiar if you've used the kunai before. Personally, I just really like the bubble mechanic. You can kind of set up a few bubbles before engaging and then go into the fight already having pressure on the opponent. It's a nice way to set yourself up for success. The bubbles also have nice tracking and linger for a decent amount of time as well, which makes them pretty annoying for enemies to deal with. Continuing down the list, we have the Lapis Fang. This is probably the point on the list where every weapon that comes after this, including this one, is genuinely a pretty good choice to go for. You finally get a solid variety of combos here, including spinning attacks, ground slams, and more dynamic options overall. The strong attack is also a projectile, but it has two different variations depending on whether you're on the ground or in the air. The grounded version is slower but hits harder, while the aerial version fires two faster but weaker projectiles. Overall, this weapon just gives you much more to work with compared to the earlier entries. It feels more complete and has just much more versatility. Next up, we have the Danzo Kunai. This, in my opinion, is the perfect example of a weapon that's strong without being broken. It offers a really nice balance between close range and long range combat. You also get a good variety of strong attacks depending on whether you're on the ground or in the air. The second aerial strong attack in particular is really good. It has solid tracking and stays connected on the enemy for a long time, which makes it very reliable. The tracking overall can be a little bit inconsistent at times, but aside from that, this is just a very solid and well-rounded weapon. Continuing on, we have the Tenten Scroll. This weapon basically lets you use a variety of ninja tools, everything from a kunai to shuriken to blast bombs, smoke bombs, and even healing tags. The catch though is that it's mostly randomized. Every time you use a strong attack, you get one of these effects at random. Because of that, the weapon is actually pretty hard to rank. You never really know what you're going to get. Sometimes you'll drop a smoke bomb and disrupt the enemy, other times you might heal your team. It's completely unpredictable. That said, it's still a pretty decent weapon overall. It has a good firing rate and can feel quite oppressive if your opponent doesn't know how to deal with it. But if someone with good movement closes the gap and gets in your face, yeah, you might be in a bit of trouble. Alright, let's move on to the most recent weapon released, the Orochimaru SS weapon. This is the most recently released weapon in the game, and overall it's just a really solid addition. The strong attack fires a large wind-style projectile which works best when used from long range. It has good tracking, solid speed, and stays active for a while, but it also comes with a long animation, so missing it can be pretty costly. A lot of the light to strong attack combos end with the 5-finger seal, which debuffs the enemy by increasing their cooldowns and reducing their ninjutsu damage. One of the combos also uses Orochimaru's snake form, applying poison to the enemy. So yeah, it is a good weapon overall. Not broken by any means, but definitely fun and effective. Moving down the list, we have the Kazekage puppet. This weapon lets you take control of the third Kazekage as a puppet, and honestly it used to be my go-to for range types when Sasori first came out, and it is still amazing to this day. It does a great job between blending close range and long range combat, mainly thanks to its strong attack. It lets you fire Iron Sand at the enemy, and if it connects, it poisons them, which is incredibly valuable in fights. I think the only real downside to this weapon is the lack of combo variety. There just aren't that many light to heavy strings, so it can feel a bit limited in that sense. But aside from that, it doesn't really have any major weaknesses, just a very strong and a reliable weapon overall. Next up, we have our first SS Plus weapon on the list, the Ink Scroll Holy Monk Likeness. Even though I personally find it a little bit underwhelming for an SS Plus weapon, it's still very strong compared to most others in the class. The main mechanic here is that you can switch between two modes using the strong attack, a close range mode and a long range mode. The close range mode is, I think, just fine. It doesn't really do anything particularly impressive, but it's nice to have it as an option. The long range mode though is where this weapon actually really shines. It lets you fire off size ink beasts at a really good rate, and they usually have really solid tracking as well. And they can just be very difficult for enemies to deal with, especially in chaotic fights. So yeah, maybe not the most insane SS Plus weapon out there, but definitely a strong and usable one. Continuing down the list, we have the White Light Blade Kamui SS Plus weapon. Now, before we get into this one, it's important to mention that this weapon is currently unreleased. So I only tested it offline. I didn't want to take it online because I didn't feel like getting banned, and also it wouldn't really be fair against the opposition. That said, I've seen a lot of mixed opinions about this weapon. Some people are kind of disappointed that it's not DMS Kakashi, but personally, I actually really like it. In fact, I think it offers more variety than almost any other weapon in the game. You get 6 different jutsu, and you select them by using your left stick in combination with the strong attack. Each one does something a bit different. There are some standard projectiles, but you also get things like a stun, a wall, and even a water trap. Now, not all of them are going to be equally useful, but I do think most players will find at least 1 or 2 options that fit their playstyle. I've also seen people complain about the tracking, but from my testing, I didn't notice any major issues. That said, I didn't use it online, so it might feel a bit different there. Overall though, I think it's a really well designed weapon, and I have to give the devs credit for putting this much effort into it, even if it doesn't end up being super meta. Alright, continuing down the list, we have the Fire and Lighting Staff. This is another one of those weapons that really does a great job of mixing both close and long range combat. To simplify it, your light attacks handle close range combats and your strong attacks focus on the ranged options. And those strong attacks come in 3 different variations, including fireballs and lightning strikes. I'm not going to lie, this weapon is just really fun to use. The combos look great and it gives you a solid toolkit to work with. That said, I do feel like the range side of the weapon is stronger than the close range side. The light and charge attacks can be a bit inconsistent when it comes to tracking. It's not a huge issue, but it is a bit noticeable. On the flip side, the light attacks do have some really good knockups and stuns. And the strong attacks are just straight up very good, especially the fireball, which you can actually loop in certain situations. It's also very easy to chain a full light attack combo directly into a strong attack, which adds to the overall pressure this weapon can apply. So yeah, one of the coolest weapons in the class or even in the game overall, and also a very strong one in the current meta. Okay, next up on the list we have Deidara's Detonated Clay. This is still, in my opinion, one of the very best SS weapons in the game. It has a really strong stun built into its kit, which allows you to extend combos for a long time if you know what you're doing. On top of that, the projectile tracking is some of the best you'll find on a fully ranged weapon. Now, it's not perfect. Sometimes the projectiles can go completely off, especially when you're in the air, but that's honestly an issue for basically every single fully ranged weapon that the game has. The weapon also has a good amount of combo variety. There's a bunch of light to heavy combo strings which add some nice versatility. It can definitely feel a bit cheesy to use at times, but there's no denying it, it's still a very strong weapon. Moving down the list, we have the Skyward Bow. This used to be one of the most annoying weapons in the game when it first released. It has since been nerfed, but it's still a really strong option. What makes it stand out is just how many tools it has. You get a standard light combo, 3 different strong attack options depending on how long you charge it, and a special status effect arrow that applies through the light to strong attack combo. Once the enemy has the status effects, all of your strong attacks become significantly better. For example, the second strong attack normally fires a kamui arrow that passes through walls, but with the status effect applied, it also pulls nearby enemies inward, almost like a mini universal pull. That alone gives the weapon insane combo potential and a really diverse kit. My only real issue is that it's fully ranged, which isn't always ideal depending on the situations, as I said before. But aside from that, it's still an amazing weapon. Okay, next up on the list we have Momoshiki's Palm Ice. This is probably the best ranged weapon you can get in the game without relying on scrolls, since it comes directly with the Momoshiki DLC. And yeah, everything about this weapon is just really solid. It has a very oppressive strong attack that's easy to spam and deals great damage per projectile. On top of that, the light attack combos ends with an almighty push both on the ground and in the air, which can hit multiple enemies at once. There are also some really nice light to heavy combo strings. They don't completely change how the weapon plays, but they're fun to use and add a bit more variety. The charge attack is good, the tracking is solid, overall it's just an incredibly well-rounded weapon, especially for an S-rank weapon. It's honestly amazing. Next up we have the Azure Blade of Annihilation. This is another weapon that just does everything super well. Great damage, a strong set of combos, a fantastic strong attack, and one of the best charge attacks in the entire class. The strong attack fires a vanishing Rasengan, and by holding the button you can shoot up to 3 of them at a high speed, though they do not have any tracking. For a single strong attack, that's extremely good and lets you pick off opponents from afar very easily. The charge attack is also incredible, almost like a slightly weaker version of Kawaki's Sukuna Hikona God Hunter, and it lets you close gaps instantly. Visually it's amazing as well, with nice animations, shadow clones, and the vanishing Rasengan effect. Overall, one of the strongest weapons in the entire game, not only in the range class. And finally, at our number 1 spot, we have the Inferno Sword. This is Sasuke's SS Plus weapon, and in my opinion, it's still the best ranged weapon in the game, even after all this time. The main reason is the strong attack. It's a sweeping Amaterasu slash that applies burn, which is easily one of the best status effects in the game when it comes to dealing damage. But it's not just that, everything about this weapon is just super solid. Great light attack combos, strong tracking, high damage, it has really everything you'd want. So yeah, for me, it's still one of the top ranged weapons in the game, and honestly, one of the best weapons overall. And that's the entire list. Let me know in the comments what your go-to ranged weapon is and whether or not you agreed with my take on the weapons in this class. I'll see you all soon, bye!